Video games are always innovating on ways to capture the gamer's attention, and the introduction of new mechanics or features can usually make or break it for anyone. A sudden quick-time event in what seemed like a regular cutscene can easily sour a player's mood. Meanwhile, the average indie game's art direction might be enough to make you want to give it a go without even knowing anything about it at all. But what if that deciding factor is baked into something fundamental to the game's design? You've read the title, so you should know we're talking about movement. Great movement in video games will feel fluid, with the experience being smooth and speedy. A strong foundation in the movement mechanics within a game allows you, as a player, to layer your strategy and assert your will. Something that allows you to manage your mobility skills. The situation and the strategy you have in mind are all fundamentally necessary for amazing feeling movement. We can point to audio and visuals as key elements in making movement feel awesome, but those are ultimately just secondary enhancers. After all, there are some video game movements that look janky as hell, but feel great when executed. So let's try to figure out how that can be. We'll start off with Ghostrunner 2 as an example. In Ghostrunner 2, you play as a cybernetic ninja, tasked with taking down enemies, utilizing all the abilities at your disposal. You can use grappling ropes to avoid danger, wall run for mobility, and dashing and sliding on top of it all. And it all feels great. Now to ask the question, why is it great? The reason why movement like this can be fun is fairly simple. Quick thinking and adaptability, combined with the ability to complete a goal in a bit of a free-form manner, means that every player can approach this game differently every time, be it from taking the safe route or taking the risk of going for a parry every time. This is what most would call player expression. Combining with how much micro-decision is able to link into each other seamlessly allows for a flow state, something we mentioned in a previous video. Check it out if you haven't yet. It's the feeling of having immense concentration and getting into an energized groove. Everything just seems to click and you hit an unhindered streak of momentum, displaying peak performance. Making these decisions in quick succession can be likened to jazz. There are the right notes to hit, unspoken rules to follow, and grooves you have to follow as originally as planned. But more often than not, you're riffing off an original idea, making hundreds of decisions in a second, probably failing a few times, but then adapting to somehow land graciously on your feet. Of course, this all sounds great on paper, but not everyone is mechanically gifted by the gods to play perfectly. So wouldn't including all of this alienate a certain group of gamers in forcing them to experience a game in a specific way? Yes, this is why games include higher difficulty options and even the coveted perfect run trophy. Achievements or even rewards bless those who tread towards the path of mastery, while newer players are given the slow motion bailout move if ever they miss a jump. Some might call this Coyote Time, a reference to the cartoon legend Wile E. Coyote in games like Celeste, which allows you to jump a few moments after missing your jump to a ledge. This allows casual players to live out the power fantasy of pulling off great stunts by giving them a reasonable helping hand, while also allowing for a higher skill ceiling to those who put more effort into improving. Now let's take a look at the specific principles of movement that I think are pivotal in providing these experiences. Any games you can think of with satisfying movement often have at least one or more of these. Hopefully, understanding these ideas would allow you to spot them in your own favorite games, and maybe you'll realize, oh, I actually like that about the game. I just never thought of it like that. So first we have environment interaction. Movement is all about changing your position in the world, and so to feel like you are actually a part of that world, you should be able to make use of it. And we'll see that in things like using wall jumps, grinding on railings, and other unique mechanics. The player should be allowed to be resourceful with how they want to approach the movement. Reward the player for creative use in the environment, whether extrinsically, like with an achievement or item, or intrinsically, like having it look good to be able to show off to their friends, can encourage player expression. And as we mentioned, player expression is important for the fun of movement. Not allowing players to interact with their environment would limit the replayability of the game in regards to how to approach it in different manners. There would be fewer possibilities, and you would likely be limited to the small number of basic directional movement options and nothing else. Titanfall, Breath of the Wild, Super Meat Boy all have those environmental interactions, allowing you to wall climb, wall jump, or wall run. But for a game that lives off these environment interactions, we can take a look at. In these games, the whole skate park is an environment that you can interact with. If you don't have great interactions available with this environment, then you wouldn't be playing as Tony Hawk or Red, but just an ordinary dude. But add in those interactions and you'll get something like this.
What's your name?
Interacting with the environment is one thing, but there is another thing at play in these clips: combos and timing or rhythm. Why put together combos and timing? Well, these things go hand in hand. Comboing is chaining together your different options into one another. Timing is doing all of that, but usually with a certain rhythm to it. Sure, you can just keep jumping around and doing tricks, but without knowing how you're going to combo that next, you're bound to wipe out. You might not even realize you're doing it, since most games don't give you a combo counter for moving well. But adding combos and rhythm to movement gives players access to the earlier mentioned skill expression. The feedback of your inputs chaining into one another and nailing those tight timing windows or sequences is its own reward. For example, you can chain together liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Not having the option to chain in between each move would make the whole thing feel unnatural and stale. There wouldn't be any natural transitions between running, walking, jumping, and sliding. This also sets a lower ceiling for skill and mastery, as there'd be nothing else to do with movement. When you have combos, there are transitions, there's agency, there's control over how you want to traverse space, all while looking and feeling good. In Pizza Tower, a game about scaring the living crust out of an evil tower, you can Mac run into a slide and suddenly go for a wall run to jump off of it to turn around and dash grab in mid-air. If you've done something like that before, then you've comboed your movement without even realizing it. Knowing when and how to use your different options is a helpful skill test and is an inherently motivating factor when striving for mastery. The motions will begin to flow, and with greater mastery of these options and possibilities, you will be able to build up your next aspect. Momentum. Just hearing the word makes you think speed. But the game doesn't need to look fast to have momentum. It just needs to feel fast. And feeling fast just happens to be a consequence of better gameplay. Take the more recent 3D Sonic games for example. They usually just zoom really fast through stages, and the game will often hand you the speed boost as a mechanic. But it feels empty. It's fast, but it's unearned speed. Meanwhile, the 2D Sonic games appear slower in comparison, especially whenever you hit a platform, a wall, or have to stop to a halt. However, in the 2D games, if you're able to gain familiarity with the levels and the gameplay, you'll go faster than you initially could. You no longer have to think about how to react to a novel situation or how to get past certain obstacles. You just know. And that's when you feel true speed. This all ties in with the previous concept. Momentum is the game allowing you to continuously combo without forcing you to stop. If you deftly maneuver the area, you're allowed to continue going without interruption, letting you keep yourself in that flow state. That's what makes it feel fast. Conversely, the loss of momentum can make for a jarring and extremely unpleasant experience. Just the illusion of speed isn't enough to feel momentum. Only by the game allowing you to build up that momentum through mastery and knowledge of the game will you be able to feel that the decisions you make in your gameplay have a direct effect on your speed. Finally, once you gain that mastery, you'll be moving at max speed. A game with good momentum lets you know that any slowdown is no one's fault but your own. But that fear of slowing down from making a mistake or missing a timing window is part of what makes momentum thrilling. This leads perfectly to our next point: risk and reward. Nothing elevates the fantasy of agile mobility in a game more than the feeling of taking great risks for even greater rewards. In competitive games such as Valorant, where movement negatively affects accuracy, knowing when to stop moving to shoot more accurately or moving erratically to avoid enemy gunfire adds that extra depth. It's balancing this risk-reward assessment on top of everything else inside the game that often separates the greats amongst the pros. In other games, that added risk makes the movement engaging and gets the old neurons firing from strategizing and gets the adrenaline pumping. Look at Superhot. Here, time is directly tied to your movement, and you have to dispatch your enemies by using things around you to your disposal. Moving progresses time, rendering you more vulnerable to the bullets flying your way, while staying still lets you more easily assess the situation, but leaves you unable to proceed. Juggling risk and reward by thinking when and by how much you should move, as well as keeping in mind what you should do next, is what keeps the game super and hot. Another example is the super hot heroes in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, where you have the option to cancel your attacks into a dash and vice versa. This rhythmic chaining of moves has an inherent risk of mistiming it, leaving yourself open to counterattacks. If we were to remove the risk and reward of this mechanic, there would be no tension or no reason to improve your skills. Scenarios would be predictable, your power would be unearned, and your victories would feel empty. Of course, there are those who enjoy that kind of power fantasy, of being able to easily win and beat foes with the press of a button. But if you can win by using the same move over and over without worries, you're going to get bored quickly. By introducing risk and reward, you start to adequately challenge the players and motivate them to keep playing. They reach a perfect balance between the difficulty, the scenarios, and the skill they currently have to enter a flow state where they display intense, pure, concentrated gamer energy. Concentration, gamer sweat, and skill checks. These were the ingredients used to make that last item on this list, game mastery. The use of game mastery in this context is understanding the ins and outs of the game, its niche interactions, weird physics properties, trajectories, and even level layouts. This can be applied to video game movement through having consistent systems and a clear and steady foundation of the rules of what is possible. Throughout the discussion of these principles, we've brought up player expression a lot. It can't be helped. The extent of how much a player can express themselves is dependent on their grasp of the game. More knowledge or mastery of the game means more ways they can express themselves. This isn't even counting their mechanical skills. This is why it's important to set up solid footing that allows any level of gamer to live out the fantasy. A well-constructed system elevates the newer, not-so-skilled players without patronizing them, while also providing a higher skill ceiling for those who want to pursue more. Let's take Fortnite as an example. Fortnite, of course, has your cookie-cutter movement mechanics, mantling over obstacles, sprinting, jumping, and sliding. But then all of this is augmented by the ability to build. Learning how to build walls and ramps quickly gives you an immediate height advantage and cover in combat. You'll be able to protect yourself and maybe even juke your opponents by concealing your position. And it doesn't end there. You are able to edit currently placed structures to how you see fit. See this wall? Nah, now it has a window you can shoot through. Normally, you would be limited by your movement options, having it dependent on the levels the game would give you. But Fortnite allows you to control this yourself. You get to provide the environment you want to move through. Just remember, the same goes for your enemies. It might be hard to imagine a game without the concept of game mastery, but there are many games with lower skill ceilings that don't have to focus much on movement. Story-focused games or walking simulators are some that immediately come to mind. But for games with great feeling movement, allowing for a level of game mastery is a must. Now let's double dash right back to our initial example with all our newly acquired knowledge. Let's look at it again with the knowledge we have now. We jump on a vent to grapple and wall run into a specific direction after dodging an energy beam. That's environment interaction, comboing, timing, and risk and reward. It's then up to your game mastery to recognize that this dash would clear this distance, allowing you to destroy the shield and kill this enemy after comboing it into a wall run. And pulling all this off smoothly is what gives you the feeling of going super fast. Developers adopt some or all of these principles when focusing on creating satisfying movement. Keep an eye out for the next time you find yourself thinking a game feels good to move in. But now they are almost never applied alone in a vacuum. Great movement is augmented by the smooth transition animations and satisfying sound effects of switching between wall running, dashing, and jumping, adding that extra layer of immersion. Then we have the smart placement of the air vents, the walls, and the enemies, which can be attributed to brilliant level design. But those are topics for a different day. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one. Bye!